on this episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists.
I'm a firm believer that a dental hygienist is the most impactful healthcare worker of a patient, that there's no other professional amongst that team that can provide as much of an impact given what we do chairside and also, that interpersonal connection that we have with them. I've been reaching out to and have been part of, lunch and learns for schools, my school and other schools in the neighboring areas, to speak to near graduating class members and talk to them about the transition into the real world and what to expect, what to look for, what to ask for in the interviewing process. And I think it's incredibly important that they understand the support of a DSO.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tale of Two Hygienists podcast, episode number 455. My name is Andrew.
And I'm Annie.
So, listeners, we have a great episode for you. Actually, the next 2 weeks are going to be phenomenal, assuming that we actually get our one for next week recorded at some point. We're bringing back student roundtables. I'm really excited about that. We had some students that were out of the St. George, Utah area reach out, and they wanted to do an episode. But if you understand the life of a student, depending on how far removed you are from that experience, it can be quite hectic. And so, I think we're trying to record later on this week, and so it'll be ready for next week, we hope. But in this episode, Annie, we had Alex on, and I just can't say enough good things about him. He's great.
He is so great. It was such a great conversation. I loved listening to him talk about his experiences and where he started and where he is now, and he just speaks so highly about the DSO space, and it's just really encouraging.
Well, I think it's, he comes from a pretty objective opinion. I think that's kind of what we need in life nowadays. I think, obviously the podcast knows how pro DSO I am, and I try to rub it down or shove it down everyone's throat, but it's just something that this is one of the reasons that whether you're in DSO or not in DSO, you need to be open to change. You need to be open to implementing new ideas.
Yep.
And with the hopes and the understanding that it's going to make your life easier, but then your patients are going to get even healthier. There's some new products that are coming to market all the time. And I mean, I don't know, Annie, how tired you are of this like chlorhexidine debate conversation.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right? I mean, like how many more times are we going to talk about this?
Honestly.
I was having a conversation with someone earlier about the new lawsuit that's coming out about fluoride.
Yes.
I just like you
These
guys
topics, we just like beat our heads. It's like that.
But again, you go into the hygiene things and you see that there are really two sides to this. Okay, if there are two sides, then there's got to be something out there that'll satisfy either side, right?
Right in the middle. Yeah.
So like let's figure this out, and that's something that Alex did a really good job of kind of conveying. Like he's doing his best to always just be alert, be open, constantly learning, and just I was mostly joking, but like honestly, if you ever wanted to come on and take my spot on this podcast, I think that he'd be a great replacement for me. So,
no way, not even. But I do love though how Alex, like you said, very objective, but he talks a lot about his mentorship working in DSOs, and I think that's really helps facilitate a lot of, especially new practicing hygienists, to get exposed to different, like you said, products and instrumentation. He does such a great job supporting and facilitating that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's hard. I mean, students and maybe new grads that are out there listening, like this is the type of environment that you're looking for. There are places out there. It doesn't really matter where you're at in the world. There are offices that are really good about being a mentor to you, whether it's DSO space or private practice. Like they exist in this world. So don't give up until you find that right fit for you, that's giving you and serving you the way that you need to be served. Because again, there's just so many options out there. But we're going to keep this one a little bit short because Alex is just awesome. You need to get right to him. So thanks for listening. And here's Alex.
A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome in, everyone, to the interview portion of the podcast. Joined today by Annie and Alex. Alex, thanks for being with us.
Thank you guys for having me. Excited to join.
So, listeners, I'm not going to go over the backstory because I'm going to probably do that in the intro. Let's just get right to it. Alex, I want to know kind of your history because I think our first interaction was probably an email a long time ago. And then I've been kind of following your journey over the last several years. Like, you've really done some amazing things, and your propensity for growth and change and like adapting to new things has just always been really, really fascinating for me to watch. But I want to scale it back to like the beginning. Why hygiene? How long have you been, out of school, all of that stuff?
So it's actually funny that you say that first interaction, because now that I'm thinking about it, I think it was a Facebook message I sent to the Tale of Two Hygienists Facebook group. And I think I directed it at Michelle, and it was like, hey, this is Andrew. This is the answer. And I'm like, awesome. So, but to go back to the other question, I started off, actually, a lot of people may not know, as a high school dropout. And I came from a family that was, broken early on in my life. My mother moved, out of state to a different place, a different area altogether. And so I was growing up in a single mom home and was kind of easily influenced by my surroundings. And when I got into high school, just kind of fell into the wrong crowd. And, I came out of it on the other side well, but too much time had gone by. And I'm like, by the time I got my act together, I was like, let me just get my diploma in another way. And then I started going to college, immediately failed out of college because I was like, this is not it for me. I don't care about this. This is boring, blah, blah, blah. I was always a good student, but it was just like my engagement was never there. So fast forward, I worked in different fields, and I was interested in a girl. And when I went to her parents' house, I was like, oh, I'm this or that. And I wasn't proud of what I did. Like, I was making okay money, but it wasn't like a career that I felt proud of, almost ashamed to say what I was. And so we had sat and looked over career paths, and I saw dental hygiene, relatively short career path, not too course intensive in the prerequisites and all of that. And I started thinking about when I was a kid and I would go to the dentist, which I was frequently visiting because I was not a good brusher or flosser, but I would always stare into the reflection of the operator's glasses. Like, I would be locked on their eyes, basically. And it was probably really uncomfortable for them, not thinking about it. But I was so curious about what was going on. And so I also thought about how my focal point when I speak to people has always been their mouth, their lips, all of that situation. And so I'm like, well, hey, let's try and see what happens. So I went to Broward College, which is one of the unique programs in the nation where they do 2 years of, their program is 2 years, but the first year is dental assisting and second year is dental hygiene.
Interesting.
Nice.
And so I got a unique perspective on, assisting as a whole. It gives you a taste of dentistry before you take the plunge, buying loops and thousands of dollars of instruments.
Right.
And so I got to learn so much about the backbone of the office, which are the DAs, and got a unique perspective about how, they're not our servants. They're, just as equal in the importance to the practice, right? And so that was basically my transition into the dental world. And I remember in dental anatomy, that was one of the first courses I just started really getting interested and starting preventive dentistry. And it just continued on and on and on, learning how impactful these simple things, this simple knowledge base can provide to somebody's whole life in many different ways. And I'm a firm believer that a dental hygienist is the most impactful healthcare worker of a patient, that there's no other professional amongst that team that can provide as much of an impact given what we do chairside and also, that interpersonal connection that we have with them.
It's very fascinating. As I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking that you're like this as you probably were saying, like a troubled youth, a wayward youth. And I'm like, you come off is just so like chill and calm and like put
professional.
together, and like you're made for this profession. This is really great. I love that what you said about the dental assistants being the backbone, because I mean, that they don't get nearly enough recognition, especially on this podcast, and we need to do better about that. But I love that you as your own personal core values realize what a team member means. I want to transition now into, okay, so you were working clinical chair side. I want to fast forward though to when you decided, look, I need more in my life, and I want to take the next step. How did you get to that point?
I honestly feel like I got to that point right out of school. I knew I wanted more when I was in school, almost close to graduating. I was thinking to myself, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? What program am I going to do? What continuing education? What degree am I going to pursue after this? And so I signed up for the Bachelor's of Dental Hygiene, the Bachelor's of Applied Science in Dental Hygiene at St. Petersburg College. And I started that program hoping to, because I felt that my professors in the school were so impactful, and the passion that they had in pouring everything into that program and to the young hygienists. They're the reason that I felt this passion, and I wanted to give back in that way. I quickly realized that in that environment, given the hours, given the structure in the clinic and what's available, it's really like having young children at that time. It wasn't the opportunity that I needed to support, my family. And so that was a hard, pill to swallow, so to speak, but a real one that I had to consider. And so I kept my head down clinically. I joined a DSO, much to my dismay. Coming into the interview, I was always apprehensive about DSOs just because a clinic dentist would always bash them at any given opportunity. And I think there's uniqueness about every office within any company or any private or small DSO, big DSO. And so I remember printing out resumes. This was right before COVID, September of 2019. And I just went around to every office on Google that I could find and passed out. And I passed by the DSO right next to my house every single time. I'm like, nope, I'm not going there. Forget it. Nope. Touched me. The market was, I guess, saturated at that time. And nobody wanted anything to do with me. So I was like, put my tail between my legs, and I'm like, let me go in there and see what happens. Office manager was great. She was like, oh, I know why you're here. I was dressed to the nines in my, my white lab coat and all of that. And she's like, but you need to apply online. And if there's any offices available, we'll let you know. So I did that. And she's like, oh, by the way, this office is not looking for a hygienist at the moment. So I'm like, okay. So I went and I filled out the application online. Sure enough, the very next morning, that same office, I got an email saying that they're looking for a full-time hygienist.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, what the? And so I applied. I went through the interview process, nailed it, and got the job. So I worked about 2.5 years clinically, and my passion for this profession and taking great care of patients was always there. And I'm always curious for more information. I was always curious for more and more, what can I tell my patients? New information can I give them? Staying up to date, staying in the know, always having an answer. That was my pride and my curiosity. And so we would have continuing education events during lunch, and I would always be engaged on the call. Maybe some other people were, in the car just kind of listening in just for the CE credit and kind of, staying on the clock, so to speak. But I was like really engaged. I was always fascinated. And I remember specifically after one of those events, the head of hygiene sent me a letter in the mail that was handwritten with like a little gift card. And it said, hey, thank you so much for your engagement on the call. I really appreciate it. So the little personal touch was really nice and unexpected. And so fast forward a few regional meetings later, she approached me and she asked me, hey, I have an idea for you, but it's going to require more of your time. And I know you have a young family, so we'll talk about it, in in a few weeks or so. And so it turned out to be this regional support, role, which I've come to find that what I was looking for out of school, being able to help and coach and mentor hygienists, but it was just a different way. It was not students, it was already established, some very established hygienists. And so I found my fulfillment in that way, which I'm incredibly grateful for.
Do you feel like you are more fulfilled because students are there obviously learn as well, but the clinicians you're working with now maybe are better equipped to take that next step? Like what gives you that fulfillment with this group as opposed to the students?
I think it's the ability to transform their lives in a monetary way, to be honest with you, because hygienists are, in, let's say, in a private practice setting where they're given a set dollar amount, whereas in some DSOs, I would imagine all of them, there's production bonuses, there's compensation packages put together to provide them, what they produce, right? Give them, opportunities to control that. And so giving them the tools to get better acceptance with patients and what they truly need. And then that turns into them going on the trip that they dreamed of, getting the car that they really love. Like, that's really special when you can help do it in that way, I feel.
I think it's an interesting education perspective. I work with students, and I can resonate with you at that same feeling. Once you graduated, feel like you wanted more, and I feel like I was that same exact way. So, but I think it's an interesting fulfillment of the students versus practicing clinicians, like you were talking about. And I never really considered that. And I personally don't have any experience working in DSOs. I've strictly just worked in practice and public health, and that's it. And so I want to hear a little bit more about like what that looks like as far as your role, like what it looks like, mentorship, and kind of just the details, because it's definitely the opportunities that have come your way are unique, I feel like, to DSOs versus just in private practice.
So I would say, going back to my time working clinically, there were so many unanswered questions that I had, per se, like within our system. And I remember distinctly that, the support person that I had, I would ask them certain questions about the system, like, how do I do this? Or how do I do that specifically? And like technically related. And they weren't sure. They didn't have a strong technical background. And so I would literally nerd out in the manual of the practice management software and be like, okay, I'm going to figure it out myself. And so a lot of those little things, I feel like, are what slows people down really in a big way in that clinical appointment. And so just teaching the little nuances with the computer system early on was the door opening for them to listen to me. Because some of them, like I said, are very established, right? And they're like, who is this young kid going to tell me how to practice hygiene? But I'm like, okay, well, let me show you how to do this more efficiently. Let me show you how to do this process, which they're taking 10 steps to do. Now I've reduced it to 2. And so that like understanding of, hey, I'm here to help you and support you, and opening the door in that way, then they're listening about how they're talking, how they're interacting with patients, and what they might have more of receptiveness when it comes to coaching them in that way, where some of those things are very personal to them. And they feel like if I didn't have their trust, it might have felt like an attack almost. And so my day-to-day is usually finding any opportunity to improve on their efficiency in their process clinically, in their process operationally within the practice. I'm a big ergonomics Nazi, mostly because of what my instructors instilled on us and how that impacts so much of what we do in our longevity. And that's where this podcast has always struck a nerve with me when it comes to those things, is I see ergonomics and I'm like, okay, I'm listening to that one. And so little things like that. And then obviously it gets into the details of specifics on product presentation, service presentation. And it takes me back to my background in sales, where it's really highlighting features and benefits of things that opens the receptiveness to patients to understand that this is a service or a product that they need, that they want, transitioning that from that emotional, this is scientific, you need this because of XYZ. No, I'm transitioning it to a place where these patients want certain things because they know it's going to help them truly. And when they understand that, then the decision is easy.
So then how valuable do you think working in this type of setting is for like a new graduate or a new practicing clinician? Because I feel like there's so much more support working in this setting to really help the practicing clinician transition into that space, that I just feel like when you go into practice, sometimes you're, like you said, you're kind of like on your own and some of those questions don't get answered. And so what value do you place on that for a new clinician?
It has immense value, honestly, and it's part of the reason why I've been reaching out to and have been part of, lunch and learns for schools, my school and other schools in the neighboring areas, to speak to near graduating class members and talk to them about the transition into the real world and what to expect, what to look for, what to ask for in the interviewing process. And I think it's incredibly important that they understand the support of a DSO that it can provide, that they understand that the compensation structure is set up in a way that they're taken very well care of, given what they provide for their patients. And that's something unique. And I always see those students, some of them might be half asleep, but then I talk numbers and production and they're like,
Yeah.
Compensation. They're like, what? You said what? What did you say? And so I do a lot of things like little personal touches where I'll share like screenshots of hygienists that have, reached that bonus threshold, and they'll send me a message. And so it's really exciting to share that with them and to show them that, they can be treated like, almost like a business owner of this office.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna devil's advocate this a little bit though, because I think it's really important for listeners to understand that not every DSO is created equal.
Right.
And every office within a DSO is not created equal, just like private practices. I know we say that several times in the podcast, every time we talk about DSOs, but I think it's a really important thing to kind of highlight what you said, Alex, is that you need to go into these interviews and really interview the office, because we could have, DSO A over here that is just doing the right things. Everything they do is scientifically, backed. They have the reasons, the explanations that we're looking for that's rooted in science and evidence. And then right next door, you have DSO B, who does not do those same things. And so it's really incumbent, I think, upon, and this is where I agree with you, Alex. I think every new grad needs to go through, it's almost like a boot camp or even like a residency going through a DSO, because you learn so much and you have so much more support than private practice. But understanding kind of like the limitations that can also be there. Alex, let me ask you a question, because you said a couple of times, I think a word that people don't like as much, production, right?
Yeah.
Production-based compensation. Can you talk a little bit about when someone comes to you, maybe you're interviewing someone or you're part of an interview for someone, and they're, you tell them that, hey, like you can do more if you produce more. And then you can see that look in their eyes, like, that doesn't make me feel good. You're gonna make me do unethical treatment. Like, how do you guys tackle that?
I nip it in the butt at the very moment, honestly. And I tell them that in no way, shape, or form will I ever ask you to do something that you feel is not in your patient's best interest. And we have, as we like to call it, a toolbox of many, many options that we can present them. That when we do an honest evaluation, we perform ethical treatment afterwards, and we give them the autonomy to make that choice, where I'm not, less necessarily saying, I'm not going to talk to this person about XYZ because I don't think they can afford it or anything like that. I give them what they're presenting with, talk to them about the clinical findings that I have. I present them the options for therapy that will truly help them. And then they take that decision on their own, and if I've done a good job of explaining those things and highlighting how it's impactful and benefits them, then it's really the money conversation is out the door. They become interested in improving their health outcomes And that's something powerful. And so going back on that, it's having the ability to have that discussion with the patient and speak through what those unique things are in an easy to digest way down to their dental IQ, and making quick analogies, something that they can understand and why it makes sense, because that's really the biggest roadblock in acceptance with patients is their understanding. And so it's not just blind, oh, we have this, so you must buy it. We have this, so you must do it. No, it should always be patient-centric care. And if they don't want to do it, then that's okay. That's their choice.
You said something about toolbox, and that kind of, I'm glad you said it that way, because that kind of brings us back to the why are we even having this discussion with you in the first place, is because something that you posted on LinkedIn. I think what you have as far as a structure, as far as a support, as far as a toolbox or multiple products, multiple options for patients to help those health outcomes that you're talking about, to help achieve the health outcomes, is kind of unique to the place that you work. You work at Sage. Misty Mattingly's been on the podcast many, many, many times. And you guys are, for me, an example of a DSO doing it right. And the thing that you posted on there was about, and you might have to help me with this, but you guys were working in partnership with Forward Science on looking at, you guys are doing some studies basically is what it looked like. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, one, what the study was that you were doing, but also just kind of the bigger picture of implementing change and implementing new processes, new procedures, new products, new all of those things, and how important that is.
So yeah, I would say sometime early last year, we were on a regional meeting call where we discuss, our operations, what we're game planning, what we're forecasting. And so Misty brought up that there's a new product out there that is very similar to a subgingival antimicrobial therapy. And it uses, I think she called it chitosan. And I'm like, wait a second. And I'm like, are you talking about chitosan? And she's like, yeah, I guess that's it. And I'm like, my mind goes back to the dental hygiene school where I was doing table clinics. And I actually researched this molecule back then. And it was for a product that had dry mouth. It was intended for dry mouth. And it talked about how the molecule itself was moisture loving and all of that. And so it was new to me, this idea that this molecule can do so much for, it's a high powered antimicrobial agent, a natural antimicrobial agent using chitosan. It's derived from purified shrimp shell, the exoskeleton of the shrimp shell, and it's processed in a way that there's really no cross sensitivity, but it is something that she said we're going to pilot. We're going to launch it in a select number of offices for the peer trainers. So, usually for our hygiene team, we have peer trainers that new hires will go and train with them and learn from them. So those are kind of a step above the norm in that sense, where they're checking all the boxes, they're doing everything that they should do. So we launched it with them, and we had the study that we would treat patients that needed scaling and root planing, and they would place this therapy at the same day for a very, very minuscule price to collect data. But the catch was the patients couldn't have certain medical conditions. They had to return 30 days later, and we had to evaluate them. And so we did just that. And from the 49 patients that we surveyed, there was on average 1.6 millimeters of pocket depth reduction at 30 days and 72% less bleeding upon probing in those sites. Wow. So it was pretty significant, the changes that we've seen. One of the hygienists even saw a 6 millimeter go down to a 3 with no bleeding. So wow. That was kind of shocking to hear. I got a video interview with her about that. But
that's awesome.
This is one of the things that, my DSO, Sage in particular, is always looking to find the latest, the greatest, the most cutting edge things in the market. And that's part of our oath as hygienists, to provide these things for our patients and to the public that we serve.
I love it. How does that make, you yourself, obviously, you love this. This is your kind of thing anyway. You've always been a learner. You always want to try new things. But how does that help the hygienists that you guys are all serving? Do they love it? Because I feel like change is not really something that most hygienists love.
I would say it's about a mixed bag. I think with anything that we roll out or incorporate or introduce, the unfamiliarity of it is what sometimes people are very uncomfortable and afraid of. And so, when we launched this, it had to be hands-on. It had to be, on a type it on, something that they could feel it, they could touch it, they could implement it. And so because of knowing what to expect from my hygienists that launched in my markets, I knew what we needed as far as this study was concerned. As far as the study was concerned, it provided the results that we then used during that presentation. But given what I knew about them uniquely, having spent so much time with them, I was able to kind of collaborate with Ellen from Forward Science and make a program, work with her on the slides themselves for that presentation that I felt was going to be impactful. There was one part where she had just literally p-values, from the public health. And it was just like, she had a slide of p-values and I'm like, no, we can't, we're going to put them to sleep. We need a little graph or something. And little things like that, where we have to understand who we're speaking to and what their level of understanding is, and, dumb it down for some, but give resources for others like myself who are very curious and want that extra information. And they've been very gracious to give us that, with their lead scientists and anything that we've asked them. So
that's awesome.
It's been an amazing launch. We've seen remarkable acceptance. And I would just say, for the most part, it's number one, knowing what it does research-wise, it's incredible how something so simple can be so impactful. And number two is, compared to other alternatives, it is so much easier to do clinically. It's so much more comfortable for the patients. And it speaks for itself.
That's awesome.
Man. Alex, look, I could talk to you all day. You have a very soothing, calm voice. If Annie, if you were ready to replace me, I think Alex is ready. No, seriously, I can't thank you enough for your time. You are very fascinating. I'm sure people are going to want to reach out to you. Are you open to people reaching out to you if they have any questions about the episode today?
Absolutely.
How might they reach you?
You can find me at abajer@mysagedental.com. You can also reach out to me on my cell phone. I don't care. I'll put it out there. 954-687-5775. Any questions, any advices, anything, I'm always willing to help.
Alex, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Alex.
And listeners, we'll put all that in the show notes for you. All right, thanks.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.